What's going on, everyone? And welcome to the biggest little soccer podcast on the internet, Stateside Footy. I'm your host, Steve, and that way is Adam. How you doing tonight, bud?
Yo, Steve, what's up, man?
Not much, man. I'm just pretty excited. We hired the best coach in U.S. men's national team history, and I'm still kind of over the moon about it because I never thought I'd see a day where we'd hire an English Premier League level manager to guide the U.S. men's national team in a World Cup. I'm just over the moon about it.
Yeah, you can't understate how big of a hire. Well, listen, a lot of people on Twitter I've been fighting with today are understating it. I don't get how you look at. I mean, I do. Because I think sometimes people are too reactionary when things don't go right at certain manager stops. But listen, a great manager is not going to go to every single stop and succeed. Now, the best of the best might, right? But that doesn't mean you're great, right? And we really needed to find good, great, elite, right? The elites are the Klopps and the Peps, and and listen, at some point you might have called Mourinho elite, right? He's had plenty of bad stops.
He's still elite. Mourinho's still elite.
Of course he's elite. And of course Poch is elite, right? The toughest argument for me that people make is, well, he didn't win any trophies. It's man, just do a little bit of history on the Spurs, which I know you know.
For sure. But
history, a little bit. It's not even hard anymore, right? It's literally on the internet. With a simple Google search, you can just go look at all of their finishes for the last 30 years before he got there and watch how immediately all of a sudden there's this spike in performance and things are happening that have never happened at Spurs. And then all of a sudden he leaves and things, listen, hope you can get back there. But as of right now, what we've seen since he's gone, it's kind of regressed a little bit back more toward what it was before he was there.
Well, I'll just say this, and when you put into context the work that he did in Spurs, consider that the 2 summers prior to Pochettino showing up at N17 on the north side of London, Spurs got rid of Gareth Bale and Luka Modric in back-to-back summers before Poch showed up.
You may have heard of the work they did after that move. 4 straight Champions League wins.
Right. And it's and that's so typical Spurs, right? That's the history and the nexus of my beloved Tottenham Hotspur, right? They never hang on to the players they're supposed to hang on to long enough to establish at least I'm surprised Harry Kane even lasted at Tottenham for 10 years, right? That was the shock. And then when you look at what he did in turning Harry Kane into world class and turning Dele Alli into a star in England, Christian Eriksen, Kyle Walker, Eric Dyer, Toby Alderweireld. It's the job that he did at Tottenham, that was a trophy in itself, even without the trophies. But look at what he did at Southampton. Southampton has never ever been relevant, ever. And he got them to an 8th place finish in the Premier League. Southampton never cracks the top 10, and he got them punching above their weight. He did it at Espanyol, and it's when you listen to Noah talk about his PSG days, it's that was something completely different, and that's not necessarily the style of coach that Poch is, right? But then he goes to Chelsea and figures it out, and then has a crazy second half run to bring him from 12th into European play. And then they sack him for some weird reason, but it is what it is. But before we get into the Mauricio Pochettino talk for this evening, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, but also go ahead and share that as well too, because we want to build this audience. So definitely go ahead and do that. Quick news and notes, because there is great games this weekend here domestically. We have Hell is Real. FC Cincinnati is hosting the Columbus Crew, which is going to be just an absolute barn burner of a match there in Cincinnati. Inter Miami hosts Philadelphia. Of course, that's the return of Messi. So that's actually kind of important for those who still think Miami, the whole whatever I'm off the Messi train, have been for a while, so it is what it is. But also, El Trafico is this weekend, and of course, that's a big one. LA Galaxy is looking to extend their 3-point lead, except LAFC has 2 games in hand, so they're probably going to track them down. But that being said, 3 very good domestic matches in Major League Soccer. But of course, the action this weekend is on Sunday in North London. It is the North London Derby. It is my beloved Tottenham Hotspur versus Arsenal. And I hate Derby weeks, man. I really do. Because that's the thing. It's like Martin Odegaard is out, Declan Rice is out. Merlino is out. It's like, it doesn't really matter. I'm still nervous. It just drives me batshit crazy, because at least we had the international window and it kind of distracted me a little bit, but I knew Arsenal was on the horizon. So there's that. So is there any matchup you're looking forward to this weekend, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, listen, North London Derby's awesome, man. It's must see TV. I mean, I love, like, if there is an absolute, any of the like Premier League kind of big guys showing down, it just feels different. And I think the presentation on American TV is different, right? I think NBC goes all out for those games, and it's the closest thing, like, in my opinion, it's the closest thing that the U.S. I think television providers do to like making it feel like a big college football game. In terms of the pregame and the build up and just their quality of production is pretty far ahead of like ESPN and Paramount, and it just is like they're just investing more in it. And so I love those games because I feel like I'm watching something big. Not that I don't when I watch, Madrid, Barcelona, Clasico, like I do. It's just something about, I can't even, and honestly, it might just be nostalgic. It might be like, hey, that's really where I cut my teeth in a lot of ways getting into European soccer. Was like when that early 2010s, when those games started coming on NBC, it was like, this is cool. Wow. Like, I used to have to get like weird direct TV packages to like watch some of these games. And now they're here. So, North done a lot. I mean, El Trafico is always awesome too. I always try and make a point to watch it. Pretty much as good as it gets in terms of domestic, rivalries.
Seattle, Portland used to be pretty good too, but both now are. Yeah, they're not at the level as they were not even 5 years ago. Although Portland's got a pretty amazing attack as well too, led by Evander. That dude's pretty legit. But when I watch the English Premier League, I feel like I'm watching a World Cup match. That's how, like, the production is so good and the football is so good, right? It kind of does have that feel of a group stage at the World Cup type of, it really kind of does for me. But earlier this week, man, I was watching an episode. I think you were on earlier this week with Will. I think it was on MLS Moves. And go ahead and check that out, because that was actually a really good episode. And Will does a really good job. But you guys were talking a little bit about confidence, but you also brought up Christian Pulisic as well. And I thought that was actually a really good conversation, because it really does tie into what we're going to be talking about today. And the lack of confidence as a captain. Not a lot of people seem to be talking about that, right? Not a lot of people want to hold Pulisic to the fire, especially through this run from March all the way till now, and especially during the last window, where the body language of him literally was like, I do not give a goddamn, what, about these two friendlies. He almost had the body language. I'd rather be in Milan with my club team than to be out here to play Canada. Did you get that? Did you get that vibe from him?
More in the first game than the second. I'd say the first half, he just seemed checked out. I mean, reminds me a lot. The one sporting experience I had that reminds me of kind of where USMNT is at right now is my senior year of college. we had a coach who was a really nice guy. We loved him, but just wasn't doing a great job preparing us, showing up to practice late, didn't really have practice plan. So it was kind of just like and we kind of knew that, in a lot of ways, like, no, we never asked anybody. You didn't really do that back then. We never asked anybody to fire him, anything like that. But we just kind of felt stuck and helpless, and like a lot of the life that I had as a leader and the life that, I was somebody who led my sophomore year, my junior year, I was named a captain my sophomore year. There was a lot of energy that went into that leading. And when your coach is not matching your passion as a leader or your standards that you want to set, because you can only go so high, like as a player. And I think Pulisic has a lot to grow into as a leader, but I can empathize with where the guys are at, because I've been there, because I've been on a team that wasn't being coached to the standard it probably should be. And we all kind of felt that, and we were all kind of helpless. And I get these guys are like 25, not 21 like I was, but it's still hard. Like, you're not a coach. You're not the lead. You're not the guy leading, the charge. I think he needs to start to think of himself a little bit more like that. I think that's the growth he needs to kind of step into. I think a lot of other players in his situation would have come into camp and just been the alpha and be like, I know Mikey Virus is coaching us here, but I'm going to lead the charge here. Like, Mikey, you take care of the tactical stuff. Like, I got the boys. Like, we're going to bring it for you, man. And a lot of that's just like him projecting. And I get that that's not him. I get it. I just think it needs to be a little bit more of who he is, right? And you can't make yourself something you're not, but you can certainly be intentional about what you say and what you do. You just can, right? I've grown players into that as a coach. I've grown players into being intentional about what they say and intentional about what they do. Are they dynamic leaders by their senior year? No, but they can certainly lead. They certainly get when it's time to say something, when it's time to shut up, when it's time to yell at someone, when it's time to get on a freshman. And Pulisic just, now listen, maybe he's been hung out to dry and nobody's really helped him develop that. I don't know, but it's time. It's time, man. But yeah, first game was so he was playing hard, but he just rolling eyes and disengaged from teammates who aren't playing hard, and to me that's unacceptable.
100%. I was on a team. I grew up playing baseball a lot, and I was on a team where we had a dude who ended up going first round in the draft. He was a very good player, but we were on a team that wasn't really all that great, but he knew he was the star. And our coach let him get away with murder. You know what I mean? Like, bad games, it didn't matter. And we didn't have the clubhouse atmosphere where players could literally just pull other players' cards. You know what I mean? Like that, those are the best kind of teams, right? Where there's self-accountability. And if you didn't play, but you didn't play good, or you didn't play, you didn't have a stretch of good games where you were playing up to your potential. Our coach, there was a different set of circumstances for certain players, right? So for the rest of the team, it was it was a collective. But that being said, if any one of these other dudes tried to pull this guy's card, we would be reprimanded. You know what I mean? And for fear of losing playing time over it, right? And it fostered such a contentious environment where we were actually a pretty good team and we underperformed so poorly that year. And then when we didn't make the playoffs and our star player was like, I can't believe it. And we would turn to him and be like, what the fuck do you mean? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, we were trying to tell you the entire time, but unfortunately we would lose playing time if we said anything. And when I looked at this U.S. men's national team, I'm like, dude, it felt the exact same way. You know what I mean? Like, is there that environment was so kumbaya, that environment was so soft to the point where I don't think anybody literally could pull anybody's card for fear of losing, for either being sent away or fear of being relegated to the bench.
Definitely was not a part of the culture. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's part of the culture at all in terms of just creating. You have to foster an environment where tough conversations can happen, right? Mm-hmm. That's something I learned in my time as a coach. Certainly didn't do a good job of it earlier. Kind of seeked out some people who I thought seemed to be doing a really good job building a culture. And it's I remember I had this tough situation my third year, right? We had a bunch of guys get into trouble off the court, and all of a sudden, all this stuff came out in the second to last weekend. that was just boiling over. Hey, guys drank before this game, and I never really found out about that. All this stuff, and I felt like a victim as a coach, right? As a coach, I was like, oh my God, like I've just got bad guys, bad eggs. And it's like, I didn't have bad eggs. I had 18 and 19-year-olds. And like what they needed, they needed a really strong environment where there were upperclassmen who had been taught, and you fostered in the upperclassmen how to hold others accountable, how to have tough conversations, how to not ignore things, right? Like there's a whole skill set that goes into that. And I'm talking to my coaching mentor after the year, and I'm whining and I'm complaining. I got bad eggs. I got to get rid of them. And he's like, this guy's won like, the 11 championships in Canada, and just like the best probably Canadian college coach that there is, right? Which doesn't matter much here, but winning is winning. And so I had a chance to,
winning is winning. It doesn't matter where you're at.
I had a chance to have this guy talk to me really whenever I wanted to. I had a connection, to him, and I was like, he's just the best. I mean, brilliant. Like, could have easily coached high D1 basketball here and won championships. He's just so good. And he's like, Adam, he told me a lot of like, idioms, but he's like, I'll be honest with you. Like, do you think there's a coach somewhere who could take your team and could have won more than you did and had those things not happen? In all honesty, tell me honestly. And I was like, for sure. Like, no doubt. Like, I was 26 or something. I was young and didn't know what I didn't know. And he's like, and Adam, I'll be honest with you. Every single one of my championship teams, we've had something like that happen. He's like, now it never boiled over, but do we have guys drink before games? Every year? Like, do we have freshmen get in trouble, off the court? Every year.
Every year.
He's like, it's not about avoiding these issues. It's about creating an environment where you're ready to take them on. You're ready to handle them. You're ready to have player, and it starts with like building, a sense of ownership from your players to be your first line of defense, especially your vets and your upperclassmen as those develop in your program. And I don't care whether you're a national team or a college team or a professional team. Yep. That's going to be the same across the board. If your vets are bought into your culture and understand that they have to be the protectors of it, and being the protector of it doesn't mean lead by example. It doesn't mean come into camp and be a nice guy and be friendly. It means when player B is not doing what he needs to do, it's like, I've got some kind of tool. It's not always yelling at him. Sometimes it's telling him nicely. Sometimes it's pulling him aside. Sometimes it's putting him on blast. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. That just wasn't happening. In my opinion, the only thing that was happening with us is like when stuff boiled over, Berhalter was doing like team meetings to apologize and like weird stuff that isn't. Yeah. Accountability is much smaller than a big team meeting to apologize. It's catch it when it's small and hold it accountable. Right? Seemed like to me he let Gio Reyna, for however many days, this thing boil up to a point where it was like unavoidable. Like, couldn't you have on day one just caught that as a coach? Like, and it's hard. I wasn't there. I don't know. Maybe he tried, but those are all the kind of things that I kind of see out of this team, and I kind of relate back to my personal playing and coaching experience. And I'm like, smells kind of like this that I've been through,
Right. I almost feel like with Gio, though, it's like if there was any type of issue, he would just call his dad. And have his dad run interference with Greg. They played together, so that was that whole that
could have, but maybe that prevents Greg from honestly holding him accountable early. I mean, it's just holding people accountable is hard. I failed at that a lot as a coach. I let stuff go for way too long, and then by the time you try and catch it, it's been going for 2 months or it's been going for 8 practices, and you're like, I don't like that.
And then what does benching do for that player at that point when you've let it go for however long? Now, that's a very good point. And that's why I love the Mauricio Pochettino hire, because during his press conference today, he was just echoing culture. Right. And you talk about, you were talking about how you had that mentor, right? His mentor is Marcelo Bielsa. You know what I mean? Like, his mentor is one of the very best, and he was talking about culture and how he has time. But you talk about holding players accountable. He doesn't really have that much time. You know what I mean? So if there's an issue, like I remember him at Tottenham sitting star players down for whatever the case may be. He would sit them out of game. You know what I mean? Like he understands a big game, and yeah, he probably could have used him, but guess what, man? There's infractions. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I mean, obviously I can use you, but you know what? You're not above the group. You're not bigger than the team. And you can't walk into the training center and just sit there and act like that without any type of repercussions. And that is the nexus of building a culture where not only can you hold yourself accountable, but you can hold your teammates accountable in a way where there's not going to be disharmony in the group. You know what I mean? I'm sure you've coached teams where players were checking each other, not in a bad way, but it's like, no, we don't do that here.
Yeah, when we actually got our culture together and rolling, and culture doesn't always equal wins. You have to have talent. There's a lot of things, right? You got to coach that talent well on court. But like for my last 5 years, our culture was rolling. We had a couple awesome years that were like, some of the best in school history. And we had a couple really bad ones too in between. But the thing that was like constant throughout it was like we were always day in and day out, right? And this was once again one of my coaching mentors, fighting for our culture daily. And fighting for your culture daily, right, is like, I'm not going to let one little thing slide. And that's what's really hard coaching, Yeah. And especially in a national team environment, you don't have that much time with them. You really can't let anything slide. Correct. Right? You have to be like exacting with your standards because you have even less time to get them to understand what those standards are. And so, that my hope when it comes to Poch, I want to cover something before I get to some of my thoughts on it because I think it'll tie back. There's a lot of talk out there right now. These guys are entitled. These guys don't play hard. These guys don't have it. They're not who we thought they were. They're not Dempsey. They're not, there's a lot of this talk. This almost like writing this team off, right? It's out there.
I don't know, man, because I remember that match against England in the World Cup, man. It seemed like they had it then. Yeah.
So I got a bunch of things I want to say. First of all, who I was my senior year of college in that environment, I like to think is not who I was. It's certainly not what every coach, going back to my coaching mentor, it's not what a lot of coaches could have gotten out of me. And I truly believe that. I think that coach got more out of me as a sophomore, more out of me as a junior. And by senior year, for a lot of reasons, I checked out. I'm not proud of it. I definitely could have owned it more. I definitely could have done a better job. It kind of bothers me 20 years later. But at the same time, like 1000%, there's a lot of if you put Adam Turner, who was, a 3-year captain and somebody I wanted to run through the wall for a coach, But when I was put in the wrong environment, I kind of became a little bit of a shitty leader, kind of became a little bit of a whiner through that season, right?
A little complacent.
Definitely got complacent, man. Worked from the time I was 10 to 22, the least amount I trained basketball was 21, 22 my senior year. Because once again, I was just jaded, man. And it's is that the right response? No. Is it a human response?
100%.
It is. And we have to. So, do I think our guys are just, crappy guys who don't want to? No, I don't. I think we've seen those guys under Berhalter play really hard consistently, run through the wall for him. I don't think that was BS. I think those guys felt like that in the first cycle, and I saw them play that hard, right? I think we were tactically off at times, but that's not the point, right? I saw these guys respond. And it's not that they can't respond. It's that, and I see them for club team playing totally different, honestly, and having different attitudes. It's just this team environment right now, just from the summer. I think even leading into the summer, there were some things that were kind of boiling up, and then it boiled over. And then we came back, and there was no resolution, no movement, no anything. It was just hey, you've got Mikey, who's the assistant. And from what Mikey was saying, it was we're going to do the same things. And I think guys were just, a lot of guys were just this is just limbo. And it sucks that they were like that because that's a terrible, approach. And a lot of people are well, if they do that, there's no way Poch can get them to do anything else. I'm no, guys, not how it works. Not how it works. If I had an amazing coach come in the year after my senior year, I didn't play, but hypothetically, if I had an amazing coach come in, I would have been re-energized. You would have gotten the best version of me if I got a super high-level coach who came in and was like, hey, Adam, I watched your tape last year. Not close to good enough. I would have been like, oh, crap. All right. Like, let's go. Like, I'm excited to prove it to you. I'm excited to show you are really, like, you can challenge a player like me. You can challenge a player like Pulisic, a player. We've got a bunch of guys you can challenge, and they will step up. Will all of them? I don't know. Maybe, probably not. Some of them might not. Some of them might not be down and be about it. Poch will figure that out. Those guys will be out really, really quickly. I think we're going to see a drastic turnaround in the energy, the life, because I just think that's what happens. I don't even think that's a Poch thing. I just think new coaches make that happen, right? The fact that it's a really good coach, I think is going to put that change into warp speed. And then I think it's going to be more sustainable because he's a good coach. Sometimes you see the new manager bump fall off after a couple weeks. I don't think that'll happen. I think he's going to be able to sustain it. So.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story Clint Dempsey was talking about during the first Jurgen Klinsmann cycle, and he left Dempsey at home, right? And Klinsmann calls him and says, "You're just not doing enough at the club level," right? And he ended up calling in a guy that he knew that Dempsey knew that he was way better than, and he just said, "I'll see you next time. I'll see you next week." And you're talking about Clint Dempsey, who's the most arrogant, most cocky, brash dude the U.S. men's national team ever had. And, Clint even said that it motivated him, because you're essentially, and this is something that had happened all throughout his European career at Fulham, where a coach would say, "You're just not good enough. You're not good enough right now." And it would motivate him. And all of a sudden, a month later, he'd be in the starting line. And it works, right? It's like understanding how to push certain players' buttons, right? And of course, we're talking about Mauricio Pochettino, who's been able to do that with the best in the world. You know what I mean? And that's that's why I kept pounding it on social media. It's like, listen, man, there's a reason why I didn't want Balogun in this last camp, because I didn't think he had earned it, and I think it sends the worst message, especially to a guy like Christian Pulisic, who can literally look over his shoulder and be like, you know what, dude, you just literally weren't good enough. You know what I mean? Like there's guys that deserve to be here a lot more. And that's, and what's funny is I talked to Will about this, and I just said, hey, listen, man, there's a reason why I wanted Jordan Morris there and not Balogun. And it has nothing to do with, I think Jordan Morris is going to be able to win and Balogun can. It's just because I know for a fact I'm going to get max effort from this dude right over here, because this guy's got a chip on his shoulder, and he's going to give me max effort in the game, in training, and he's not going to take the crest for granted. He's not going to sit there and act like, whatever, man. Like I can literally just not play well, and I know for a fact I'm going to get called in and I'm going to be starting over here. You know what I mean? Like maybe I can use this as a springboard to get into my season over here. Like that's not what the national team is. That's not what the national team is about. That's what it's never been about. You know what I mean? Like there's been so many instances where dudes just didn't get called in because they just were not playing good. And so that opened the door for other guys to come in and have a look. And especially in friendlies that, it's not Nations League. It's not Gold Cup. You know what I mean? Like where you have a set roster and you're going to play through it. And, you're going to develop some cohesion and chemistry through a tournament, right? It's just a couple 2-off friendlies. Like this is the moment where you're supposed to give looks to other guys, and you can also use it as a motivational springboard for some guys that are just not performing well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he's going to have to.
That's why I'm motivated for Pochettino, because I think he understands how to push those buttons.
Yeah, and I think certainly he's got a lot of experience, doing it. Probably has a lot of experience failing at some of those experiments the last couple tries. But here's the reason I want to kind of circle back to something, because there's a lot of hate out there for the PSG days. I was just in an argument about it an hour before we jumped on here. Some guy was like, I sucked at PSG, sucked at Chelsea. And I'm like, guys, where he's like totally flamed out, had Messi, Mbappe, right, Neymar, and couldn't make a Champions League final. I'm like, can we just give it? He didn't have Messi and Mbappe the first year. That's the problem. He played City and Messi didn't play. And Mbappe set out, I think, the second leg. So, like, I don't get what you want him to do. Like, he didn't have those guys. That team was literally built around those guys to the point that they actually weren't as strong in some other spots. And then he didn't even have them, right? And then the next year, I think Neymar was hurt against Real Madrid in the first leg. So, like, it's a 1.5, little over 1 year thing. And then, Chelsea is a 1 year thing. And, like, people are judging him based on that. And here's my point. Anybody who's ever coached understands that, like, 1 year, get out of here. Like, if you said, hey, Adam, you can take over this basketball program for the next year, I'd be like, cool. Like, by the end of that year, I'm going to really start to really officially know our guys, hopefully have an idea of who we're recruiting and bringing in to change the culture. And then I'm going to need another couple years with those guys that I bring in to actually institute real meaningful change. Doesn't mean you can't see some improvement. You will. But, like, if you want to know how a great coach is operating, it's not, okay, I've got 8 months here. And I think that's Poch's problem, right? A lot of coaches do work like that. There's some things you can do, quick fixes. And Poch seems more like a builder to me. He's always struck me like that. I mean, I think is by far his best experience coaching was Tottenham when he could really build it. And they built and they built and they built and they progressed. He did have some early success. I mean, not right away. I think the first year they didn't finish in the Champions League. The second year they finished in a Champions League spot. And then he kept moving up. And, like, that, I'm excited for that. And I think this will get us into another topic of conversation with us, which is, like, I'm a little nervous because it's like I'm not sure if he's going to have as much success maybe in the first year as a lot of people think, right? I do think the new manager bump and how low we are right now is probably going to boost that. It's probably going to feel like better. But I don't think, to a lot of people's point, like, I don't think he's coming in. I don't think by next summer it's going to be, oh, my God, this team is ready to, like, win a world. No.
Well,
but
it's going to take a minute.
If you give him 2 years, I do think he can have us playing really, really solid soccer, which is what we need to be able to do come the World Cup to have a chance to make a run. Yeah. And then the intriguing thing, which you and I were tweeting back and forth about, is what's the long-term play here, right? Is there a long-term play where he's, which we might not know about, right? It might just be like, hey, our plan together, Crocker, Poch, his staff, is for this to be more. The contract's only 2, but we're all thinking this is going to be 2+4 if things go well on both sides, right? I'm sure Poch needs to go, could potentially not want to come back. We could potentially not want to bring him back if it doesn't go great. But it seems like the door's open and the thought process is like, hey, this could be 6. If we get him for 6, which is also kind of a perfect amount of time because it's not 2 full cycles, right? Like, and I think he's the kind of guy that I think by year 4, which would be like, in between the next 2 World Cups,
the next Copa America.
Yeah, it'll be next Copa time. Yeah, exactly. Next Euros. I do think he can have us playing incredible soccer, like totally earth-shattering, USMNT changing soccer.
Right. Probably like competing for a Copa.
And I think you saw at Spurs, this, like,
yes,
the longer he had with those players, the better he got at coaching them. That's how I felt.
Right.
Like,
no, 100%. Well, I asked you specifically because that was my only one concern about this is, like, what happens with the youth teams, right? Because one of the things that Pochettino definitely utilized while he was at Tottenham was their academy. Like he utilized some of those academy players and they made it up to the first team. Like that's a big extension of Pochettino's tenure at Spurs. And that was my biggest. That's like, if he's just a hired gun and he's only here through the World Cup and then that's it, and he's going back to club, what happens with the U23s? What happens with the U17s, the U13s? Right? Like, is he in charge of the youth academies? Is he going to hire coaches to run a style that's similar to what he's doing with the national team? So these young kids are playing through that style. So when he's ready to bring up somebody from the U23 so the first team, they're ready to go and they understand exactly where their place is in the team and what's expected of them, that type of thing? Or does that get put on hold, right? And if that gets put on hold, then we're dealing with another set of problems of what we saw under Jurgen Klinsmann, where that whole block, our U23s never qualified for the Olympics. You know what I mean? Because, on one hand, Klinsmann developed the U systems, but that being said, they weren't running fluid. Like as a technical director, he wasn't necessarily, keeping a hand on it. So what's Pochettino's role when it comes to that?
And I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't think either of us know 100%. I don't know why. I just don't. I've never gotten this. I don't know why.
That's going to be essential. If he's here past 2, that's going to be essential. Like,
no idea why your national team coach would have the keys. I just don't. I'm sorry. Like I say that because it's if you look at the turnover, running a youth academy is about total long term, right? Hiring a U17 manager as a national team manager is like a waste of time. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, how many national? In all seriousness, let's say how many national team managers their first year, right? Let's say if they hired a U17 coach, how many are with the national team long enough to see any of those U17 players make it to their system? It's pretty rare. You have to be like a 20 or 21-year-old. You have to either be a 2-cycle manager, Deschamps, right? There are some, but most are 1 cycle or less, which is why I don't understand that concept, right? Like, I totally get bringing that person into the fold, but to me, it's kind of like the GM coach conversation, right? I don't think coaches in professional sports should be GMs. I get that happens in soccer, but I think that coaches, there's such crazy turnover with coaches. As an owner, I wouldn't want my coach, who could be very temporary, to be making all of these roster decisions in this big picture roster. And you see this happen in soccer all the time. And then the next coach comes in and goes, well, we got $200 million worth of players. They're not my kind of players. So shit, we got to sell some on discount, lose a bunch of money. It's just kind of, and so it's a similar concept here where I'm like, okay, if he's all in for 6 years, even if they have kind of a handshake agreement, right? I'm all in for him to have a big hand in the youth teams, because that timetable makes a lot of sense. If it's 2, then it should be Crocker. It should be Crocker making these calls and decisions. He can clearly hire coaches. He can clearly recruit coaches, right? I have no issue with Matt Crocker being the guy who's in charge of that vision for the youth teams, with Poch kind of giving input, right now. To your point, if Poch is here 2 years and he's running the youth teams, to me, that's a disaster. Because one, why would he put a ton of time into it? I don't know why we would put somebody in charge of it who I don't want him to put that time in if he's only going to be here 2 years. I want you to maximize the senior team, which has been all your time in the senior team.
Because that's what you're essentially hired to do, is be that gun for the 2026 World Cup. But I do know that Klinsmann, as a technical director, had the keys, had the entire keys to the program. Same thing with Berhalter, and that was made abundantly clear where during the Olympics, word came out that he was he had a heavily influence in picking that U23 team for the Olympics as well too, right? So it's widely known that certain coaches have that cachet where they're given the keys to the entire program. And
I think a lot do. I don't think it's like a rarity. I think that happens all the time. I just think it's stupid.
100%.
I just think it's dumb. I think you're going, I don't know, unless you're really feeling like this guy is going to be here for the long haul and you're all in, which, to be honest with Klinsmann, I think we were pretty all in on Klinsmann being 2 cycles from the jump. I mean,
100%. And I thought, and I'm in the
system and all that stuff, but yeah.
I'm in the rarity, but I thought Klinsmann did a good job. We got a comment here from Soccer Satan. Hey guys, loving the new content. Thanks, man. I'm still a Klinsmann truther. That's the new. I guess that's the new lingo. That's the new intersectional language.
Klinsmann's impact on U.S. soccer will be long lasting. I think he opened the door and changed a lot of things that have become relative norms now and they weren't when he was there. He was, kind of chastised for a lot of that. I do think he was to give some credence to the people who are Klinsmann haters, which I'm not, but he was erratic. Tactically, it was weird at times, really weird. And it didn't always make a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, you can't argue with his results up until World Cup qualifying, when I think he just lost the team. I think it was just too long. Kind of like Berhalter. It just hit a point where, like, he wasn't a good enough coach to have his voice resonate for that long. You have to be a really good freaking coach, Steve, to have your voice resonate. I was only a college coach. I had to have it resonate for 4 years with guys, right? And your junior and senior year, it was just my relationship with you was way different, so it evolved. But it never got – I can't imagine coaching some guys for 2 or 3 more years. I really think they would have started tuning me out. I just do. Like, I don't even care if I was doing a good job.
Well, that's, I heard from somebody that kind of knows. I'm not going to put his name out there, but it was because Jurgen Klinsmann was so anti-U.S. soccer while being he was like, the beginning of the end happened when he left Landon Donovan off the World Cup roster. A commercial appealing player who had television, had contracts for commercials. You know what I mean? That was going to make U.S. soccer a lot of money, and he gets left off the World Cup roster. That was the beginning.
And he was an MLS guy at that point, right? He was the bannerman of the MLS.
Right. And because MLS has such an influence over the national team.
For sure. Poster boy for MLS. I mean, he really was at that time. Can't be understated.
But also, Don Garber was kind of pushing dudes onto the World Cup roster, because if there was any type of 2010 moment like Landon Donovan against Algeria, it's a huge boost to the league. And at that point in time, it wasn't what it is today, right? So he kept telling MLS players to go play overseas. And he was mad at Clint Dempsey and Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore for coming back. Right. And so he kept rocking the boat to a point where U.S. soccer was like, dude, you're just too much. And I think they used that second cycle of qualifying as a reason to get rid of him. And I still believe that if he would have been manager, they would have gotten qualified. But
I think they 100% qualify. I think that was like, you were at the point, and you always have to weigh that, right? Like, a lot of people were like hardcore Berhalter out after a couple games. I mean, a lot of people were just waiting for that anyway. And I eventually moved to the camp that I thought we needed to move on from him. I was always really nervous during World Cup qualifying, mainly because of that experience in 2017, where it was like, we need to get to a point where this is literally not going to work 100%. And the problem is Klinsmann just wasn't at that point. It was after like
it was 2 games of the qualifying cycle, of the beginning of the qualifying cycle, when they brought Bruce Arena. It was after the reason was that because he had used weird formations. Like, dude, he's like, not all his European-based players were available, and so he had to rotate his squad, and he was using formations that would benefit the squad, and so they got rid of him. But what's crazy about it is that once Bruce Arena came in, a lot of those dudes absolutely just disliked Bruce Arena. There was a lot of ego that Arena couldn't handle. It just is what it is. But before we go, we got to get into the 3 things that we want to see Mauricio Pochettino does from day one that is going to radically change this thing. And I'm going to start with you. What are the 3 things that you think are going to be the most vital that he's going to have to do day one to get this thing pointed in the right direction?
So I think 1, he's going to have to develop relationships very quickly with guys. He needs to get to know guys. It's hard to coach people, especially with the other 2 I'm going to name. It's hard to do the things that I think he needs to do if you don't at least understand what makes guys tick. And he's going to have to like put those relationships in a microwave somehow. He's going to have to get to Europe, meet with him, go to training sessions. He's going to have to work his butt off, right? Which I hope he does. Because in the next, 6 months, he needs to have a really good gauge of this team, right? Some of that will be from the training sessions he runs. Someone will be watching with clubs. Someone will be watching film. Someone will be having conversations and talking. there's a whole blend of that. I don't need him to be best friends with people. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what a relationship, coach-player relationship has to be. It's like, I'm going to understand what makes this guy tick. I'm going to be able to, he's going to understand what my vision for him is, right? With our team, the expectations are going to be really clear. There's going to be trust built, which takes time and it's tough. But like I said, he's going to have to find ways to like microwave that trust. So that's number one, because I think my next two things that he has to do are so hard to do if you don't know your players and you don't have trust, which is two, he needs to 100% totally restructure how the team leadership is working. And I'll kind of combine with that. I'll cheat and combine like how to motivate these guys, right? I think they're one and the same though. I think like reworking how the leadership structure is working and empowering leaders on the team and, you know, really defining what leadership is on this team. That's what's going to kind of bring this team back together, right? I mean, that is when people say he needs to bring the team back together, that's a cool thing to say, but like, what are the action steps, right? I would say, well, cool, what are your action items, right? Action item 1, develop relationships. Action item 2, like actually restructure the leadership, you know, almost like you're remodeling a corporate, you know, company, right? It's like, yeah, I'm coming in, I'm restructuring the thing. And then I think third, you know, so with that is empowering the leaders, right? Making sure that guys, you know, are understanding what their roles are. It's very clear, not just on field, but off. And then my third one, Steve, is, and this is going to be the hardest one, is like, you have to get this team's confidence and mojo back. Some of that will be setting them up the right way, figuring out what formation it works the best, figuring out, you know, how you want to possess and like what the best way to possess is. But like a lot of it is going to be confidence. And so my number 1 bleeds into my number 2, which in my opinion, if you have trust with your players, you build good leadership structures and organizationally, you understand what everybody's roles are and guys start to have it defined. Now all of a sudden you can start to think about, how do I build confidence in these guys? And some of that is small conversation. Some of that is watching film. Some of that is, you know, encouragement. Some of that is, just simply going and being with them for a couple of days with their club team and feeding them encouragement. But like, and honestly, then feeding the group what your vision is constantly, even if you're not there yet, right? You just keep feeding it to them. Tell them that they're not there. Tell them why they're not there. Tell them, here are the things we need to get better at, but we are going to get there. I love that he said, like, it was a kind of an affirmative statement of like, we can win a World Cup. And I was 100%. Like, whoa. I was like, that's big. I was like, that's big for him to just kind of say that. But I love that he said that, because that's the kind of like talk that's going to do number 3 and bring confidence.
Yeah, because I can't remember a coach at an introductory press conference talking about winning the World Cup. You know what I mean? Like that was, you know, it's always talking about building to get to that point, but, you know, it is what it is. I like that, man. I really do. For me, the first one is attitude. Change the attitude in and around this team. And I love today when he was talking about he wants his team to be arrogant, right? Not so much arrogance, right? Because too much arrogance breeds egos, right? But that's actually would be a good thing, because some of these dudes' egos need to be checked. Like I like guys like Gio Reyna and guys like Christian Pulisic. Like the best example I can say is like they're the soccer equivalent of a trust fund kid. Like they were handed big clubs at a very young age,
sure, and
they did not have to work for it, right? While other guys on the team actually had to grind their way through academies to get to a first team and then sit on a bench and then impress their coach enough to get the minutes off the bench and then utilize those minutes to get starting roles. And then, you know, their starting roles, maybe they were overlooked for a little bit before they finally caught the eye of the national team, that type of thing, where there's other guys who have literally had to grind. And so that attitude, that attitude and that arrogance has to be checked on day one. And I firmly believe that everybody has to be, you know, on the same level, right? Like it doesn't matter that you play for AC Milan or Juventus or you play for Crystal Palace or, you know, whatever the case may be, right? There was always that baseline of we're all on the same page here. You know what I mean? Like that can't be, you know, we can't have just dudes acting all like, you know, arrogant trust fund kids, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is reestablishing standards within the national team, because I don't really care who the coach was at that. There's always been one like baseline standard with the team, which is like you have to earn your way into the national team, and if you're not performing, you're not guaranteed a goddamn thing on this team. And it doesn't matter if your name is Christian Pulisic or if it's Gio Reyna, Tim Weah. It doesn't matter, because we have a player pool that's at his expense. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. It's like, if you're expecting things then without putting in the effort, then it's just not going to work out. You know what I mean? I'm not suggesting he freezes anybody up, freezes anybody up. It's just that's the thing, is like, we can't be in a position where you're taking things for granted anymore. And that's, that to me was the biggest issue, was the fact that there was a lot of guys that just didn't care, or they took it for granted because they knew for a fact that they were going to get called in regardless. That has to change from like day one. But the other, for me, the third thing though is that I'm just going to echo what you said about your third thing. It's just reinstilling confidence, because I think this team hit an all-time low. I really do. I really do believe, right? I think they were so far from where they were in 2022 in Qatar. I'm sure that they wanted to try their best, but for whatever reason, they just don't have direction. They don't have leadership.
Yeah,
and getting everybody pointed in the right direction from day one.
I'd be really interested to see, because I think he's going to set us up tactically in a way that's going to be, and especially as his ideas really start to get through, which isn't going to be in camp one, not to burst anybody's bubble. It's just, it could be way better in camp one, just because I think guys will play harder, but I don't think tactically we're going to start to see like our team understanding what he wants, even though I think he's going to do pretty simple stuff. I don't think it's going to be crazy. I think he's going to like emphasize pretty simple soccer, standards based on what we've seen him do at all of his stops. He's never been a guy who has like overly complex systems, in my opinion. It's more like simple patterns of play, simple understandings. And then I thought he emphasized this in his press conference, playing hard off the ball. He kind of mentioned like playing hard off the ball, which starts with how you move to get open for your teammates, which I loved that. I was like, oh, that's cool. Because that's what, in my opinion, that's one of the main things that we haven't had, in the last decade, honestly, is we haven't had a system of play where guys work hard off the ball to get open for each other, which really is how you ignite anything advanced in soccer, is when, players get open in dangerous spaces instead of just trimmed edges. So that all of that, what I'm really pumped about though, is over the next 6 months to see how players' confidence grows. And there's going to be no way for me to prove this, and people will probably be able to say, poo-poo to that. But I think that when you're playing, this, right? Like if you're playing in a really well-defined system, like your confidence goes up. If you know that you're batting in the 2-hole in baseball every day, and who's in front of you, who's behind you, you understand what your coach expects out of you every at bat. Like, just the more you define stuff, and the more guys understand their role, and the more guys understand, especially in a game like soccer, which is so interconnected, they understand very clearly what the goals are, right? The patterns of play are. All of a sudden, confidence goes up because you have faith in what you're doing. You have faith in your teammates. That really deteriorated the last 2 years, Steve, in my opinion. I thought technically we were always a little weak under Berhalter, but man, I thought the last 2 years it got rough, and you could see guys' belief in it just go down, which then confidence, lower energy.
Right, there was no flexibility, right? So it was like, we're just going to try to do this, and we're going to try to shove this down your throat, regardless how many times it didn't work. No, I 100% agree with you. I don't think we're going to actually see his vision manifest until Gold Cup next year, maybe.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Well, yes, go ahead.
I want to say, because I just thought of this, right? So because I'm in my senior year mode, because I've been thinking about it. My senior year, we had this offense we've been running for 4 years, and coach called it, call it motion, we call it the wheel, right? And essentially in basketball, it's like, I'm going to try and semi-draw it up. You have your point guard, and he passes to the wing, right?
Yeah, the motion does.
goes down here to set a down screen. This wing over here curls off, right? So it was this continuity where you had a curl cut, a down screen, a guy coming up, a guy looping out, and then a repeated, right? You swing, you do the exact same pattern, right? You kind of imagine that without knowing exactly what it is. And for the most part, we kind of knew we were trying to get this curl layup, kind of knew you could shoot a shot. We didn't really know what we were trying to do, just to be honest. Like, there was never emphasis in like, this is where you're going to get a score, you know? And so we ran this thing, man, for like 3 straight years. We get to the 4th year, we're playing at a higher level. We moved to this new league, better coaching, better scouting, all this stuff, right? And the first game, because obviously these guys just like watch game film from the previous year. It was like they do this. We had like 3 plays, Steve, and one of them was this, and we ran it 80% of the time. And literally the other team was calling out and talking through exactly what we were doing. Like, hey, you're about to come off a down screen. And I'm like, shit. Like, hey, my guy's curl cutting.
Yeah.
Crap. And I think it pertains. I think when stuff is really predictable, that's how I always felt watching us playing under Greg.
Yes.
So it was predictable, and it wasn't random. It just seems so. And that's how when coaches talked about playing against us, they kind of referenced that as well. Multiple times, you know, coaches talked about.
Well, Jesse Marsh was saying it, the week before the Canada game, where it's essentially like, dude, they like to build out of the back, and Matt Turner's first move is the ball's going to go to the left. It's going to go right to Tim.
Mike is going to run the same stuff they ran under Greg, and we totally get what they did under Greg. Super easy. Right. Same thing. We know what Bard basketball's doing under Coach Wood. Right. We're doing the motion stuff. You got to guard the curl. You got to guard the down screen. There it is, but easy.
Right. If we collapse in the midfield, they can't turn up. So there's going to be no through ball right through the middle.
They have to trim the edges. Now we slow them down. They don't pass quickly. Yeah. All that stuff, right? But like the effect of that as a player, in my opinion, is like just like total discouragement. Having another team know exactly what we're doing, and as a player being like, "Fuck, I know this isn't going to work." Like,
right.
Just, and that's kills your energy. Like, should you play hard still in it? Yeah, but you just naturally kind of don't. Like, you're just kind of like.
I was screaming at the TV, just send balls up the field.
Right. Just do something.
Right. Yeah. Well, just send it upfield and stretch their defense, right? Let's change something. Something had it's like when they collapsed on Tim Ream and he's trying to get the ball to Christopher Lund as that little escape pass. It's like, Lund, just pop that ball up the field, right? Let go Christian and go run for it. You know what I mean? Like, regardless of what happens, it's going to stretch the defense. And then you're actually going to see underneath runs, because if Christian gets to it, we're going to have 3 guys running to the goddamn post, right? It's like seriously, just open it up. But it's like, dude, it's like, nope, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this so goddamn much that like we just know this works. Like, you just have to believe it. It's like, well, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's not tactical fluidity, right? That's not. As a matter of fact, Mauricio today at his press conference was like, he mentioned the word fluidity. He was like, we're tactically fluid. It's like, yeah, dude, really? Depending on the opponent? So your opponent's not going to know, like, if they watch game film on you versus Colombia, and they saw that you were building from the back, but you're having your low eight as being that escape hash, and then it's like, okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our midfielders set here. So if the ball comes in, we know for a fact that we're going to cut off their passing lanes, and we're going to force a turnover. So we're going to be able to pop on the counter right there at midfield. And so and that's the thing. It's like, oh, so that's what they're planning for. So we're going to do this. You know what I mean? We're going to show them something different where they're going to have to adjust to us and not us to them.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you my summary here. Here's my optimistic summary. 1, any new manager who is at least, competent was going to raise the level of this team. 2, Poch is not just any manager. He is a high-level manager. Our guys are going to have the utmost respect for him coming in. His name carries weight. Where he's been carries weight. What he's done carries weight, right? Like, the players he's developed carries weight. Our guys are going to come in and it's going to be like, yo, listen to this dude, we got Pochettino coaching us now. So that's going to warp speed what already would have been, right, an easy win, which is like players just get more disciplined. When a new boss shows up, you get more discipline. You show up on time. You don't do the stuff that you were getting away with under the old boss. Now it's a great coach, so you're gonna warp speed him more. And then 3, he's going to be tactically competent, tactically flexible. You're going to see things that make sense. Our guys are going to have aha moments where it's like, yeah, aha. That's how we crack that code. Guys are doing, defenses are doing this to us. They're playing a mid block, low block. They're pressing. Aha, like Poch is going to have ideas that, no offense to Greg, probably just doesn't have. He doesn't know. He doesn't understand, right? And then that's going to really open the floodgates to the confidence and like uncracking the code. So that's my optimism, man, is that like in the next year to 2 years, we just see that this all being unlocked little by little, and to the point where, by next summer, it's, twice as good as it was last summer. And then by World Cup, it's like we're primed and ready to go for a run. That's the optimistic take, Doesn't always go like that, but like I feel like we're poised for that to happen.
I agree. And before we call it a night, I'll just say this: that the first thing is Pochettino is not going to be a miracle, right? This isn't club soccer. This is international football. Okay, where he has sporadic windows, and it's not going to be overnight where that communication of what he wants and what he's trying to do is going to be able to bleed into this team. It's going to happen over multiple windows. And that's why I think you're not going to see quintessential Pochettino football until probably Gold Cup next year. Right. And even then there's still going to be a large learning curve. But by then you're going to see tight, tactically sound football at least by the Gold Cup. It's in reality, it's going to be like that friendly window right before the World Cup 2026. We should be by that point, we should be running on all cylinders going into the World Cup. Yeah.
That's the optimistic view.
Yeah. I mean, is your glass half full or your glass half empty? Right. So, all right, that's going to do it for us. Any last words tonight, man?
No, man, it's a good one. We're less than a month away, which is so exciting. We don't have to wait 2-3 months for it. Like we get to start to see the journey begin, in a couple of weeks with a roster announcement, and then I think 3 weeks or something like that. So.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. The next international window is going to be absolutely fantastic. I'm doing live streams on both games because of course, man, it's Pochettino's first window. Of course, I'm doing live streams. Also, pay attention because I'm doing classic live streams. I'm going to get some video on some classic U.S. men's national team games from back in the 90s and early 2000s. Maybe some different windows. That's going to be fun as well too. And also, lastly, I can't wait until Pochettino utilize Josh Sargent. I'm the biggest I'm the biggest Josh Sargent homer, and I can't wait till he unlocks that dude. And I could everybody all those Josh Sargent haters out there that are calling him weak ankled. It's like, dude, just wait, man, just wait. That's gonna do it for us, man. Thank you for tuning in. Okay, of course, like and subscribe. Also share this so we can build this audience. That would be very much appreciated. Thank you again, Adam. Thank you guys for tuning in. Good night.